Hello, this is day 3 of Unit 4, Usability Tests. Today we are working with problem identification with websites and developing scenarios for your usability test that you're going to run. Some things to make sure to have for drafting 4.1. And some ideas to make sure that you have clarified. First off, make sure that you understand that the proposal is written to your client, and your client is the website's owner or the company's owner that is running the website. And let's make sure that we are clear on this point. Although this is a situation where you're not actually going to submit this proposal to the website's owner, so that part of the project is fictitious. The website that you're looking at is real. So you've identified a real website, and this real website has a owner or a company is backing up this website. So make sure that you have names and contact information for this company or the website's owner. That should be accurate. Think of including client-themed colors, logos. So if I were looking at a department website for OU, then I would include the OU logo on the proposal. I probably would use crimson and cream colors for some of my headings. So keep that in mind. Also include a formal cover page and table of contents. The table of contents is really important. Don't assume your client knows this assignment or the requirements of the assignment, and this means that you're going to have to explain why you're providing some of the information that you are. So on your end, you're providing information because you're meeting the criteria of this assignment, right? But on your client's end, they don't know why you're providing certain pieces of information. So make sure that you justify these pieces of information. Your introduction should provide a nice summary of who your client is as a brand and what the goal of their website might be for. So frame your proposal when you're talking about your client and the company as they or we, because your client is not an individual, although they are an individual, but they're a representative of a team, right, or of a group that is this company. So make sure your critiques are geared towards that brand identity. And related to that, and this is incredibly important as well, critique the website, but do not insult. Most of you will be working with websites that are promoting a local business. Keep in mind that local businesses have websites that are designed and or run by the owner, somebody close to the owner. So you don't want to frame your critiques as insultive and frame them in ways where you think that there is something to work with, but improvements could be made. So always keep tone in mind. This is something that I stressed at the beginning of the course, continue to stress it here. Tone, especially when you're working with documents or via electronic communication, tone can be interpreted in many different ways. So this is one situation where you want to frame your critiques in ways that they will be received as constructive criticism. Build for scannability in your proposal, but also for depth. Not everything should be in paragraph format, but not everything should be in bullets. So you want to balance the two, because there are certain sections where you need to provide an in-depth review of a situation, but there's also other sections where bullets will suffice. So a good balance is something to keep in mind. Your client has no idea what a usability test is, nor do they know about good web design. So you do have to teach them. So don't just make up information. Cite best practices and examples from our readings, from Krug, from some of the websites that I directed you to. If you want to cite any of the PowerPoints, that works as well. Each problem should show a possible solution from the competitor, so you will do some more research by looking at competitors to this brand and what they offer on their website that is more effective, and present these as options that your client could think about, and what kind of improvements could be made on the existing website that they have built. Use a template or mimic one, and the examples that are posted on Canvas should help you think of a template to use. And finally, images are incredibly important in proposals, so label them with arrows pointing to key attributes and provide a caption. So your images are going to be the screenshots that you take of the website, and you're going to insert arrows whenever you're discussing different areas of the web pages. And then you're going to label each image as figure 1, figure 2, figure 3, and refer to the figures in the body of your text. So for some of the instruction sets I looked at, the figures were not always referenced in the steps or the instructions that were provided. So for this assignment, you want to make sure that you provide a reference to the figure in the body of your text. So moving on, now we're looking at the top 10 design mistakes that Jacob Nielsen points out in that article that's posted on Canvas. So first off, I want to have you look at, I want you to have you think about the frames for each web page. So splitting a page into frames is very confusing for users, since frames break the fundamental user model of the web page. So all of a sudden, you're like on a page, but then the frame breaks, so you can't really bookmark that particular page, or you can't print out the page for it to fit nicely into your printout. So keep that in mind when you're reviewing the websites. Number 2, gratuitous use of bleeding edge technology should be avoided. So don't try to attract users to the site. So the web designer shouldn't try to attract users to the site by bragging about use of the latest web technology. A few people might be attracted by this type of novelty, but mainstream users will care more about useful content and the ability to offer good customer service. So this is where you keep that user-centered model in mind. Number 3, scrolling text, marquees, and constantly running animations should be avoided. Never include page elements that move incessantly. So moving images have an overpowering effect on the human peripheral vision. A web page should not be overwhelming for your viewer to look at, because they need to get some kind of peace in actually read the text. So if there's something that is overwhelming, visually overwhelming, or annoying, then this could be something to be pointed out as a design flaw. Complex URLs. Wow, this is something that I am quite familiar with. Even though machine level addressing like the URL should never have been exposed in the user interface, so this is just a little bit of background here, it's there. So users sometimes need to type in a URL. In order to try to minimize the risk of typos, websites should try to use short names for their websites and their web pages and avoid using special characters. Since I have experience with this because of my background in English, and I sometimes use URLs in reference pages or works cited pages, this can become incredibly annoying. So look at the URL for the web pages that you're inspecting. Orphan pages come up quite often, more often than not in research. So make sure that all pages include a clear identification of what website they belong to, since users may access pages directly without coming through the home page. So if you're looking on the web page and it's not clear as to where the user is at, what company they're visiting, if the logo isn't there where it's supposed to be, then this is something to make note of. For the same reason, every page should have a link on the home page, as well as some indication of where they fit within the structure of this information space. So you'll be surprised that there are many web pages that don't offer that home page link. So the user might have to might have some problems figuring out what website the web page that they're at is actually associated to. Long scrolling pages is something to be avoided. So all critical content and navigation options should be on the top part of the page. If you remember when I was looking at the Elemental Coffee website and I was on their homepage trying to look at their business hours and their location, I had to scroll down and I pointed that out. So keep that in mind when you're looking at websites. When the user has to scroll down, is that information important? Should the information be moved up in order for the user to locate it without having to scroll down? Because some users won't scroll down. They'll only scroll down if they believe there is something useful on the lower page. Next, lack of navigation support. Don't assume that users know about the website as much as they should know about the website. So within the design, the web designer shouldn't have assumed that the user knows as much about the site as they do. Users always have difficulty finding information, so they need support in the form of a strong sense of structure and place. So the website should start with, should provide like a site map to let users know where they are and where they can go. And a site map meaning like a navigation where the home page perhaps provides an overview of what's included, and the navigation bar is helpful. So maybe the user can easily scroll through the different web pages that are included through the navigation bar and see what kind of information they can locate within that website. And also, very importantly, websites should have a good search feature, since even the best navigation support will never be enough. You'll be surprised that so many websites don't offer that search option. So look out for that when you're inspecting websites. Non-standard link colors. So link colors should be standardized. By default, pages that have not been seen by the user are blue, and links to previously seen pages are purple or red. And the designer shouldn't have messed with these colors, since the ability to understand what links have been followed is one of the few navigational aids that is standard in most web browsers. And also remember that breadcrumb trail that I talked about in a previous lecture, that if a link becomes highlighted, the user should understand why that link is highlighted. Did they visit that page? Is that why the link has been visited? Is it not highlighted because, or is it in that blue font because the page has not been visited? So these clues are really important for the user. Outdated information. There's the websites need to be maintained and be updated frequently. So look out for any information that is outdated, that no longer applies, events that have passed, links that are broken. That can be problematic for many websites that are not maintained properly. And overly long download times. This is just something that can be annoying. People do not want to wait too long in order for a page to load. So there many times a page might have very busy. It contains so many images or sounds that it takes quite a bit for the page to download. So make a note of that if the website that you're inspecting takes an overly long time to download. Okay, so those are some features to look out for as you're inspecting the website that you're going to critique. Now let's look at Empathy Map. Empathy Map is very useful, just like a user persona. It's very similar to a user persona, but think of it as an amplified version of a user persona. So according to Solutions IQ, an empathy map is a collaborative tool that teams can use to gain a deeper understanding of their customers. So much like a user persona, an empathy map can represent a group of users, such as a customer segment. I encourage all of you to make empathy maps for Unit 4. However, they're not required. I do require them for the usability testing when they're conducted in groups. So this is really helpful for groups to have input as to what a target user needs and what type of target user they have and what kind of needs need to be met for this demographic. And when thinking about empathy maps, you might ask these kind of questions. What would the user be thinking and feeling about the experience of navigating the website? What really matters to them when they're looking at the website? Tasks. What tasks are users trying to complete? What questions do they need answered? Influences. What people, things, or places may influence how the user acts? What would their friends, colleagues, and boss be likely to say while the user is using the website? What would the user hear in the scenarios that are being posed to them? What would the user see while using the product in their environment? What might the user be saying or doing while using the product? How would that change in a public or private setting? What are some of the user's pain points or fears when using the product? And what gains might the user experience when using the product? These maps allow the researcher to get out what I call designer mode, to get out of designer mode, and into user mode. And so we talked about that in day 1 of this unit, where the focus of design is not the product, but actually how the user interacts with the product. So the user is at the center of the design. Okay, so now let's look at, I'm going to skip over that one. We're going to look at scenarios and think about the scenarios that you need to develop in order to conduct your usability test. So scenarios are important because they guide what the users actually do. So when you're thinking about your scenarios, think about your goal. In other words, what do you want to research about the website that you've identified? What kind of design problem or flaw do you see, and do you want to confirm that in fact the website is flawed in that way that you're thinking? So let's say you want to see how easy it is to browse and purchase from Nike's website. Okay, so we're going to think about the goals of the website, of the Nike website in particular, and you're going to add constraints to that goal. So your user goal, let's say, is to browse product offerings and purchase an item through the Nike website. And you're going to add a constraint to the goal in order for the user to perform a task. So a poor task would be to ask the user to purchase a pair of orange Nike running shoes. A better task would ask the user to buy a pair of shoes for under $40 and watch them try to accomplish that task. Notice that this accomplishes both parts of your goals to browse and purchase. So the poor task is not asking them to really browse through products because of the specificity of this task. It's asking them to locate a very particular type of shoe. The way that this task is framed is more broad, so it's actually asking the user to browse through different pairs of shoes that are priced under this amount. So there will be several that the user will look at, versus this one where there will be more of fewer options. So always keep the goal in mind of what you're asking the user to accomplish, what you want to see the user accomplish actually. So let me pose another example to you. Finding a movie and showtimes on the Fandango website. So a poor task is that you want to see a movie Sunday afternoon, and you tell the user to go to the Fandango homepage and to tell you where to click next. So that would be your task. Tell me where to click next in order to find a movie to see Sunday afternoon. A better way to ask the user to accomplish this similar task would be to tell them, use the Fandango homepage to find a movie you'd be interested in seeing on Sunday afternoon. So it's best to ask the user to do this action rather than asking them to tell you how she would do it. So if you ask, how would you find a way to do X, you're not really going to get valuable research out of that, because you're not going to observe the user accomplishing that task. And instead, what you're setting yourself up for is for the user to tell you how the action is done instead of helping you observe her completing that action. So if you're a little bit more general, I would say, but always keep the goal in mind, the user goal that you want them to accomplish something, and think of the best way in which they can do that without limiting their options. Because if you expand the options, then the user will have several methods in order to complete the task, and you'll be able to observe the user completing this task, and which will give you much more valuable insight into how the user is accomplishing that task and what he or she is thinking as they're working through the process. So I would encourage you to place some kind of realistic or emotional psychological pressure on your usability subject, tell a story, like you want them to accomplish this task for a certain reason. So when you look over the example that is posted on Canvas, you'll see that the scenario frames it in a way where the user is supposed to sign up for exams, I believe, or something like that. So there's a story behind it, and then the task is being provided. Otherwise, the user might not engage with the process as you would like for them to engage with it. So avoid using clues in your scenarios. Don't be purposefully vague, but you don't really want to be too, you don't want to lead them through the process. You do want to have them discover and accomplish the process on their own. So don't clue them in. And as you're sitting through the usability test, your user might ask you for help, and you just tell them, do the best you can. I'm not testing you, I'm testing the website. And this is something that you have to emphasize throughout the process, because when I've conducted usability tests on people automatically assume that it's something that they are doing incorrectly because they have been programmed to think it's them. So when we're thinking about user-centered design, it's not that the problem is with the user, the problem is with the design. So how does the design get improved in order for the user to be able to engage with it more easily? Okay, and I'm going to close by reading this example scenario that was submitted in the previous semester. And I want us to look at the ways that this author incorporated these tips. So a realistic story was told to their test subject, and it made the process so much more meaningful, where the user was able to engage with the website in a different way if all these extra details weren't provided. So the spring semester is coming to a close, and you are planning on moving to a new house across town with your 4 roommates. Only one of you has your own car, and you all decide that it might be too much of a hassle and too much gas money to try to drive back and forth in that one car. One of you suggests that it would be easier to just rent a truck for the day to move across town. You remember your neighbors from back home used to hire Penske trucks to move across town to their new home, and you suggest to the group that they are a reliable company to rent from. The trouble is, you don't know where the nearest truck rental site is near where you live, so without using the search bar, try and locate what location you would rent your truck from in your area. So here there's a very descriptive situation that's being posed to the user. The process becomes so much more meaningful. So the user engages with the test in a more purposeful way, so they know why they're accomplishing that task. Just providing these details to a user will make the usability test run so much more smoothly. And also, I'm glad that I read this example out loud, because if the website that you're focusing on does have a search bar, you might want to include this detail in your scenario without using the search bar, because if your user just enters keywords in the search bar, then you're not going to really see them work through the process that they normally would if they were trying to explore the website on their own, and they wouldn't use the think aloud method as they would if they were just moving from one page to the next and working through the navigation bar. So this is an important detail to add to your scenario if your website does in fact have a search bar. So that's all I have for now, and thank you for listening.